Hi, it's Tom from T&B Tech. In this video, we're going to install a PIR motion sensor into an existing SensorNode. So let's get started. We've been talking about SensorNode, which is the easy way to attach common home automation sensors into Home Assistant. If you want to get your own SensorNode, click the link below. It'll take you to the Kickstarter pre-launch page for SensorNode, and you'll be able to register to be notified when the Kickstarter launches. And you're going to want to do that because I'm going to have some early bird specials which are a pretty good discount, but there's going to be severely limited quantities. So if you want something to get the best deal, you should jump on that as soon as it launches. Now back to the video. All right, here we are. We have a SensorNode. It's working. It's got a contact closure sensor, this push button already installed. And now we're going to install this PIR motion sensor into the same unit. So the first thing you do is you turn it off and you pop the top. Because you need to get inside the SensorNode to actually install a PIR motion sensor. Now this motion sensor they're very inexpensive. You can buy them at AliExpress or Amazon. You can also get them at Adafruit. They're more expensive there. They're all pretty much the same. Take a look at this here. They all pretty much look the same. There's a little connector. Connects onto this header, which is where the signals are. The signals, there's three signals. There's power, there's ground, and there's signal. Typically, this diode here is right next to the power pin. Not always, but everyone I've seen is that way. And then the opposite pin is the ground pin. And then the middle pin is the signal pin. It's important you understand which pin you're hooking up to, or else you could blow up the SensorNode or your sensor or both. So you've been warned. If you buy the motion sensor, these sensors curated by me, there'll be documentation that shows you how to hook them up. If you don't, then make sure you know what you're doing or you got the right documentation or you could have a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook this cable up so that the red wire is next to the diode, showing that I've got power there, and then ground is the black wire, and in this case, the yellow wire is signal. To hook it up, we're going to hook up motion sensors to S2, which is these three terminal block connectors here. S2 is the connector that can accommodate one of three types of sensors, though. It can accommodate a motion sensor, can accommodate a water sensor, water detect sensor, or a temp sensor, a digital temperature sensor. So there's a couple things you have to do to let SensorNode know what you're doing and make sure the hardware is configured properly. So let's look at it. First thing you do is hook up the wires. If you look at the silk screen, you'll see it says motion/temp sense water sensor in. There's a plus and a minus. So that's the positive terminal goes here, the ground goes there, and the remaining terminal is for signal. On all of these sensors, they're all 3-wire sensors. They all have positive, negative, and signal. Okay, so what you do to hook this one up, you make sure that the terminal block screws are backed off nicely, and then you hook them up. I'm going to hook the ground up first. It's a good practice, but it doesn't really matter because the power's off. And then I hook the power up. Again, the order is not really relevant. Then I'm going to hook up the signal. Make sure they're hooked up nicely. Okay. Now the sensor is connected to SensorNode, but you have to do one more thing for an S2 sensor. You have to tell SensorNode, basically you have to configure the circuit so that it's compatible with the sensor type that you've just attached. And you do that by configuring this jumper here, if you can see it. Hopefully you can see it. It's called jumper J3 on the circuit board. And it actually it says on one side it says S2 sensor type, and on the other side it's got motion/water in temp. So basically it's a jumper, it's 3 pins. The middle pin is the common pin, so you're going to either jumper the top 2 pins or the bottom 2 pins. The top 2 pins are going to be for motion or water sensors, and the bottom 2 are for digital temperature sensors. So we're going to do a motion sensor today. So I take my little jumper here and I hook it up to the top 2 positions for motion. Okay, that's it for hardware configuration. The circuit's configured, the sensor's hooked up. We don't need to have the top open anymore, but I'm going to leave it open. And it's all ready to go. Now we have to configure the software. We do that by forcing SensorNode into access point mode and adjusting the configuration settings for SensorNode. So let's do that. First thing we do is we flip the access mode switch down, which will force it into access point mode, and then we turn it on. In a few seconds it'll go into access point mode and we'll be able to adjust the settings. There it is. It's flashing, indicating it's in access point mode. So we go over to our computer and we attach to it. There's a SensorNode. So I just attach to it like that, like I've done before. And you see it's attached. Now I open up a browser window and type in 192.168.4.1, which is a default access point mode, access point IP address. Hit carriage return, and now I have the SensorNode configuration server showing here. You don't really have to do anything else since this thing's already running except for adjust the S2 sensor settings. So if I go down to sensor settings, S2 sensor type, the drop down box, I click it and I select motion, because that's what this is. And I go to the S2 sensor settings and I bring up the motion sensor setting page. The most important thing is I have to enable it. So I click enabled, and it has a name section. I can type I've already done this before, so it popped up, YouTube motion sensor, YouTube demo motion sensor, I'm going to call it that. And the sensor active time is also very important you understand how this works for motion sensors. The motion sensor will trigger motion as soon as it sees it, but when will it turn the motion off? Well, that's what this comes into play. Right now it's set to 10 seconds, which is really good for a demo, but it makes it change quite often. So basically that means when it senses motion, it'll trigger, and then there has to be no motion at all for that active time for it to send an off signal to Home Assistant. So if you had it set to 10 seconds, when it triggers, there has to be no motion for 10 seconds, and then it'll say motion's gone. But if you had it set to 30 minutes, it would trigger on motion, and then there would have to be no motion at all for 30 minutes before it would trigger the motions off. So that's really good. It's not as good as a human presence detect sensor, but it works pretty well. I've noticed. I've got it on my desk. I set it to 15 minutes for my overhead lights, and pretty much during that 15 minutes, I'm going to move unless I'm asleep. And it will stay on. The motion will continue to re-trigger every time it sees motion. It will re-trigger for that amount of active duration time. So that's how it works. All right, we're done with this. We click Submit Return to Main Page. Now before I hit Submit and Restart, I got to make sure that the switch is thrown the other way on the SensorNode. So it's not going to go back into access point mode and to go into active mode or normal mode. So I click that. It says success. Now the thing should come into normal mode, and now it will have not one, but two sensors attached to it. The previous contact closure sensor, which I had before, and the motion sensor, which I've just added. So to do that, to make sure we could see that working, I'm going to go back to my Home Assistant dashboard. I see it flashing, indicating that the SensorNode is working. And so if I go over to here, I'm looking for a motion sensor now, but I'm going to probably have to refresh this page because it's a brand new sensor. So I'll just click refresh here. And there we are. See, we had YouTube demo contact sensor before. Now we have YouTube demo motion sensor. They both have the same last four digits, indicating the same SensorNode has both sensors attached to it. If I click on that, I can see that it went online and turned off 39 seconds ago. There's the attributes. You can see what's going on there. So if it's on, I should be able to put my hand on there in front of it, and you should be able to see it go on right here. So let's try that. There it is. I put my hand in front of it, and it should go off in 10 seconds. And it just went off. The other thing I wanted to show you is I've got this custom dashboard that I created just to show that particular SensorNode. And eventually we're going to have all four of these sensors hooked up, but right now we've only got two. You can see the motion sensor. If I put my hand in front of it again, you can see it fires and it'll go on for 10 seconds and it'll stop. But there's also the button that I want to show you. If I push the button here, you say it goes, and it's going at the same time, and it goes off because it's set to a 2-second active cycle. And the motion sensor will go off as well, as long as I don't move too much in front of it. So the only other thing I want to show you is the SensorNode device itself. If I go to that, it says YouTube Demo 3237. I click on that, and it's running as it was, but if I click in the attributes, you can see now it shows the type. It shows SensorNode contact / S2 motion, showing there are 2 sensors attached to SensorNode. One's a contact sensor and one's a motion sensor. And that's it. You have a motion sensor and a contact closure sensor on the same SensorNode operating concurrently. In future videos, I'll show other sensors. If you're interested in SensorNode, make sure you click the link below to get notified when the Kickstarter launches so you can get access to those early bird specials. But for now,